a little message on their screen that you have to be okay with that, I think.
Yeah.
Oh. Welcome, David. David's wife, Jennifer, will be joining us in a little bit once she gets off of work, but David is going to get things started tonight. I'd like to begin with a prayer and then I will introduce them. Right. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for bringing us together, for watching over and protecting us, and for being with us through all the ups and downs of our lives. We ask you to continue to help and to relieve those who are suffering so greatly these days, gracious God, those who have lost their homes and lost a loved one, those who are bewildered about the next steps to take on this journey. We ask that they might know your support and love and care and the support and care of those around them. We ask you to continue to walk with us every step of this journey, that we will always know the depth of your love and goodness. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, I want to thank our friends, David and Jennifer, for being with us tonight. David and Jennifer are friends from our seminary days back in 1999 and 1998, 99, and 2000 is when we were at Seabury. And David and Jennifer were there with their 3 children, Chelsea and Mackenzie and Joseph. And I think now you're up to 5 grandkids, David. Is that, am I counting correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. I was looking at a recent picture and I was doing the counting. 5 grandkids. David is currently the rector at St. Simon's on the Sound in Fort Walton Beach. But in August of 2005, David was the rector of St. Patrick's in Long Beach, Mississippi, when Hurricane Katrina rolled in with sustained winds. I was doing a little research on Katrina today for this, and Katrina had sustained winds of 176 miles an hour. It was a Category 5 hurricane. David can talk a little more about that. But what I've asked David and Jennifer to do for us tonight is just to talk about, tell a little bit of that story, but also to talk about some of the longer term implications of something like recovering from a hurricane. Some of the longer term emotional and spiritual, especially, implications of what we have been through and how we can continue to support one another and how we can continue to rely on our God who walks with us on every step of our life's journey. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to David and thank him once again for being with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. We're all now part of a club none of us want to be a part of, right? And it has changed your life, and it will continue to change your life really forever. And you will date things back to the day that Ian came, and before the storm and after the storm kind of comments and things like that. Hurricane Katrina hit 17 years ago, as Bill was saying. And if you drive down Highway 90, which is the beach highway in Mississippi, the beach is on one side of the highway and everything else is on the other side. So you have an unobstructed view of water. If you drive down that part of Long Beach where my church was, you won't find it. It's still gone. That piece of property, in fact, is still for sale if you're interested in 8 beautiful acres on the Gulf of Mexico. And it's like that for miles and miles on the Mississippi coast. My church was a pretty little white frame church, again, sitting there in that beach location. And we were about 14 feet above sea level.
Oops, hold on.
Got to mute there. It might have been Bill.
Yep.
Yeah, so we were about 14 feet above sea level. The storm surge at our church was 28 feet.
Wow.
So there was obviously nothing left of our building. The only thing we found after the storm was our bells. We had a small little bell tower. The bells themselves were still there, stuck in the mud because they were so heavy, and a coffee cup with my name on it.
Huh.
It didn't have a chip. It's just, it floated up and floated back down again, but nothing else. All the pews are gone. I mean, every altar, everything was gone. We established a relief center called Camp Coast Care at Coast Episcopal School, which is a few miles inland from the church. It was a school shared by all the Episcopal churches on the coast of Mississippi. And so we started a relief center there. My wife, Jennifer, whom you'll meet shortly, is a nurse practitioner. At that point in time, she's a nurse running an urgent care clinic, but had done a lot of medical mission trips to Honduras and other places, and saw an immediate need for medical care for the people. The devastation was just so widespread. The 3 coastal counties of Mississippi lost 68,000 housing units in Katrina. That's an area of the country that builds about 12 to 1,400 housing units a year. So you can imagine the impact of that. My parishioners, 32% of my people lost their homes down to the slab, and everybody had damage, which is probably similar to what you guys are looking at. Jennifer's clinic was destroyed, so she said, I need something to do. And so she set up a medical clinic in a tent outside our relief center, which was in a gym that didn't have a roof, or one of the walls is gone. And she ran that clinic for 5 months and treated 22,000 patients with free medical care. So in Long Beach and Pascagoula, we lived in Pascagoula, which is a neighboring city, town to Long Beach, where my church was. They're suburbs of Gulfport. Pascagoula started as a summer home location for New Orleans residents. It's about an hour from New Orleans. Pascagoula had 99,000 houses prior to the storm. After it, 500 of those houses were habitable. So the impact was enormous. And at this stage in our recovery, you guys are so far ahead of where we were at that time, but everybody was dealing with a mess. And I know, and I want to take questions for you guys too, but I know there can be great frustration with entities like FEMA and whatever the Florida Emergency Management Group is, or insurance adjusters and things like that. But I'll tell you, they have come so far. FEMA was a nightmare after Katrina. You remember all the stuff in New Orleans and the guy getting fired and all that kind of stuff. They had no clue what they were doing. They had not pre-staged any supplies, this kind of stuff. So we were kind of on our own for a long time, and they were inventing the thing as they went. They're much better prepared for these things, at least for the immediate aftermath. But the stuff that you're going to be dealing with now, they've got some grants I know you probably are aware of, and there's usually some small business loan things you can get involved in if you need it, at low interest rates and things like that. So let them help you if you can connect with those folks. We were because of the widespread devastation, we decided to start having church on the grounds at Camp Coast Care, and we stayed there and ran that relief center for almost 4 years. And the relief center, it initially was just handing out things to people that they needed. Then we transitioned to going and helping people muck out their houses and things like that, and eventually went to a little bit of construction, like a habitat kind of approach. Almost everybody who worked there was a volunteer. We could house 200 volunteers a night, and we rotated people in and out of there quite frequently. It was a holy place. We worshiped in that space every Sunday morning and every Wednesday night for almost 4 years, until we built a new building on a different site. We moved inland in Long Beach on high ground. It didn't make sense to us to go back to the beach because there's another storm coming. And so this is the second time, by the way, St. Patrick's was wiped out. Hurricane Camille in 1969 destroyed their church also. So, we're doing the best we can to try to at least offer worship services. And because we were at Camp Coast Care, we had a large congregation every week because all these volunteers were there. So whether they wanted to come to church or not, they couldn't eat lunch until they came over and sat with us. But at least we got to do something for other people. When you're dealing with a population of people who've been so devastated, and at the same time are having to learn that it's really okay to accept help. Bill, that might be something for you to talk with your folks on, because some of us think, I don't need that, give it to somebody else, et cetera, et cetera. But what you have to remember is some people have gifts to offer, and they have God-given gifts to offer, whether it's financial or work-wise or whatever it may be. And we don't want to deny them the chance to use those gifts. in a way that helps make their heart sing and helps people in need. So sometimes we got to swallow our pride a little bit and allow folks to do for us for a while, because you're in a situation that you've probably never been in before. And it's going to be a long, long haul to get back on your feet completely. And I will be honest with you. We had the saying in Mississippi that normal is now just a setting on a washing machine. Because we yearn for normal. People want status quo. They want things the way they always were. And that's a long way off, if at all. And the normal may be completely new by the time you get on the other side of this thing. You just have to be okay with that. Change is hard, but you're forced into change with a disaster like what you're going through. And so sometimes we build back better. There's a lot of infrastructure on the coast of Mississippi now that's way better than it was. Bridges and roads and some other things. Where we lived in the Pass Christian, our home was actually okay. We were one of the 500 that didn't sustain. We just lost a little bit of our roof and a couple windows, but we couldn't live there for over 3 months because the water and sewer system was completely destroyed in the town. Every lift station, all the pipe is all done. And they had to put in above ground sewer lines temporarily to allow people back in their homes. Otherwise, we would have had like a cholera epidemic or something. The work that the power companies do, I think, is one of the untold miracles in these situations. How quickly and how many of that army of people come in and do what they do is phenomenal. But that's, if you got to choose between electricity and sewer, choose sewer every time. We thought, we made a lot of mistakes, no question, because you really, I didn't have this class, Bill, in seminary. I don't remember if you went to it.
Me either.
The old saying that you're building airplanes as you fly it is true. And also, I want to make sure I don't talk too much about our stuff, because every disaster is different. And the environment is different, and the organizations you're working with are different. So what happened with us may not be the same kind of situation you guys find yourselves in. But we thought from the very beginning, and I've been very impressed by the leaders, Bill and Sue especially, and they've done such a remarkable job. And I know you know that. And I know there's a lot of people helping them. But Bill, you've gotten organized in a lot of different ways, and you're staying in contact best you can. And what I find people really want is some kind of, about the only normal we could give them was liturgical, to worship out of our prayer book and to do the things that we know how to do. And if we don't have a prayer book, and, that brings you together as a community, even if it's just online or in somebody else's church, and which I know is what you guys are doing. We were in a Lutheran church for a little while as well. Lutherans are good folks. But, we can say those words, and we can kneel, and we can receive communion, and it just, for at least for a moment, feels like this is okay, and God is with us, and everything else might be changed utterly, but that moment is still there. So you're doing a good job with that, making sure people have access to liturgical services as well as communion, which is super important for our folks too. So we decided early on we did not miss a Sunday. Even though we were out in the tent for a while out in the Mississippi sun, but we were there. And if people found out about us, we didn't have cell phones and that kind of stuff for a long time. They came, and it was some really special times. And then those volunteers joined us and sang in our choir and helped us in a lot of different ways. I will say we were saved not by the government, but by the faith communities. So many people from all over the world came to South Mississippi and New Orleans to help us out and stay at our relief center. I like to say that I learned every denomination has different things that they specialize in. You may have I know the Baptists of North Carolina came down with this portable kitchen. Y'all might have something like that there. So volunteers and people who are refugees, et cetera, had hot meals, and the Methodists had a little team of trained counselors who came, and we had a group of Mennonites who came down with heavy equipment, believe it or not, and helped get trees off of buildings and things like that. And the Episcopalians came from all over, and they did what Episcopalians always do. They went all over the coast of Mississippi and set up small but tastefully decorated tents for wine and cheese parties. So you got to know your people, right? But in all seriousness, it was the faith communities of all kinds of faiths, Christian and otherwise, who came and came and came, and we always knew somebody was there lending a hand through that time. So you have your ups and downs, you have moments of despair and extreme frustration. We're not patient people nowadays anyway, and now being forced to be patient and relying almost completely on someone else to get a job done and getting in line for that job to be done can be really aggravating. And but just knowing it's going to be that way for a while. I want to greatly encourage all of you to take care of yourselves. You've kind of now passed what I call the adrenaline phase, where you just got to get up and go and see what my place, I have anything left or not. I know many of you don't, and how do we get in touch with the right people and just go do this kind of stuff. But you can only run on that adrenaline for so long, and it is a long haul, and you need to take breaks from it every now and then. If those of you who are down there living in that area, you need to get out of that area from time to time, and just find somewhere else you can put your feet up and not think about that stuff for a few days. So Jennifer and I were determined about 2 days out of every month we left town and left our phones and everything else behind and just caught our breath. It's just super important you do that. It's very important that you stay in contact with other people, that you're talking to people, and this is a traumatic event. You will feel differently now every time there's a storm in the Gulf. You'll feel it in your bones. You'll feel it physically. I get physically sick whenever I see one that we're in the cone for. So this is truly a PTSD kind of thing as well. Is this coming here? What's it going to do? What's it going to do to our friends and neighbors, et cetera? So you got to talk about those things with other people and share your stories. We were very intentional about letting everybody tell their stories, and even if it's just written down or in small groups. And we even had somebody come in and work with our children for a Saturday workshop and just had them like draw things. And I'll tell you, some of the drawings would take your breath away. This used to be my church, and then the devastation from it afterwards and things like that. So they're hurting too, and they're a little afraid too. So I know, Sue, you work a lot with the kids there, and so just they need an outing, an outlet where they can talk about their emotions and fears, and they will be scared to death the next time there's a hurricane coming, and rightfully so. And they will act out in different ways. When Jennifer gets home, I'd be good to talk to her, ask her some of those questions, because she ran, after the medical clinic was over, she ran a mobile mental health clinic, pediatric, all up and down the coast, and had play therapists and art therapists and this kind of stuff. And they really focus on these kids who had been through this thing, and they were all having issues, that their parents couldn't figure out. And the parents are super, super stressed and scared and all that good stuff too. So you just got to pay attention to those things and figure out ways. Maybe the church itself can be, kind of a rock for all these different people who just need a place to come and be with others who understand what it's been like to have that kind of loss. We call that kind of loss ambiguous loss. It's something I learned after Katrina. I had a friend who's a psychologist who did some research in this. He's also a priest. Because the loss from a natural disaster like this is different than a loss that you can point a finger at somebody who caused it, right? Whether it would be or even at a disease that you didn't deserve, nobody deserves them, but those kinds of things are not ambiguous. You know who the culprit is. But in a hurricane, you should be upset and frustrated and maybe angry that this happened to you, and that's natural, and you shouldn't bottle that up. But it's hard to know how to direct that, right? So it ends up coming out in the wrong ways and unhealthy ways with other people. A lot of people are angry at God, which I always tell people, good, because God can take it. I encourage folks to go out in their backyard and holler at God. I mean, the Psalms are full of people doing that. Moses did that. I mean, you have scriptural warrant to say, why us and where were you and that kind of stuff. And God's okay with that. I think God can take all that kind of stuff. And that's a healthy way of dealing with it. Bill, we can talk about some theological stuff if you want. As we get into it, or I'm happy. I'm rambling a lot. I'm happy to take questions from people or from you and Sue.
Why don't we open it up and see if there are any questions from what you've said so far, David? Let's see.
There's a muted everyone, so just have people raise their
You can raise your hand or use your little hand raise feature on the reactions part. Anybody have a question or a thought? A practical question that I had, David, is how did you accommodate all of the volunteers? I'm just imagining, you know, you have to put people up and they have to have some place to sleep and some place to shower, and you have to feed them and all those kinds of things. How do you accommodate all the volunteers who descended on your community?
It was fascinating to think back about it. When we first started, like I said, this Coast Episcopal School was the only really standing Episcopal entity in our area. All the churches were wiped out like mine, and it was fairly heavily damaged, but it has a big grounds on it, and these volunteers just started showing up. And you know, we don't know how they found us initially because we didn't have any way to communicate with people. But we went around town with painted plywood saying medical help this way, you know, kind of stuff. That's about all we did. So people just camp out on the grounds. They bring their own tents and all that kind of stuff. And eventually we partnered with the Lutherans and set up a little group called Lutheran Episcopal Services of Mississippi. And we tapped into funding from the Lutherans and from Episcopal Relief and Development to help pay for a lot of this stuff. So we repaired the gym that didn't have the roof and part of the wall. They replaced that, and then they put in some extra showers and things, and we bought a bunch of cots. And that's how we could sleep people. We have some, you know, some kind of little, you know, 5-foot partitions around different cots and stuff like that. And then we had some volunteers come in with these mobile kitchens. We actually had a group from California who they were all I forget what you call it, but they're high quality chefs. They won all these different competitions. They'd all been highly trained in France and all this kind of stuff. And they would go around this mobile kitchen to contests. And they came down and spent a month with us cooking for us. So I'm telling you, I eat better than I'd eaten any time in my life. And they procured their own food and et cetera. Because, you know, early on, Pastor Christiane had no commercial properties standing. There are no grocery stores, no doctor's offices, no dentists, no gas stations, no drugstores. So even getting supplies was a real challenge for us. We used our network within the state because the Diocese of Mississippi is the entire state. So we ever reach out to folks, although the whole state was pretty heavily impacted as well, and start getting some stuff in there. But that's how we did it. It took months to get that established. First, we just housed some medical teams in there, and then we started seeing this need for volunteers. And we established it. We kind of shifted gears to say we're going to be a place to house volunteers, in addition to the supplies that we're able to give people, diapers and water and clothing and all that kind of stuff for those who had lost everything. And then Jennifer was able to have prescription drugs and stuff because there were no drugstores. I mean, you imagine if you are dependent on heart medicine or diabetes medicine and you can't get it, you know. So she reached out to all these different medical schools and pharmacy schools and got a bunch of those folks to come and bring supplies and stuff like that to get it going. Wow. So it takes a little money. We eventually, I think our second summer there, got a grant to air condition the gym because it gets a little warm in South Mississippi. You guys understand what that's like. And we didn't have air conditioning in the gym, so it was fairly miserable. So we were able to air condition the thing because that was an ongoing project. It lasted over 4 years, probably about 6 years before it shut down finally, with the volunteer housing.
Wow. Well,
we pay. So the Lutherans taught us one thing, that if you want to do that kind of stuff, you need to pay somebody to run it. You can't just depend on volunteers at the top level. And so we paid for a person to be over the whole thing, an assistant and a few other folks that were there all the time. And it worked out much better by doing that.
Nice. I think Jennifer has joined us here. I see her behind the wheel there. Can you hear me, Jennifer?
I can.
Very good. Well, welcome. So great to have you here.
Thanks. Sorry for the late connection. Clinic ran a little late.
That's all right. Well, David's gotten us started here, and maybe we can turn it over to you for a little bit for some of your thoughts and your insights about this whole ordeal.
Well, I tuned in late, so I'm not sure what David talked about, and I certainly don't want to waste your time repeating. tell me kind of where y'all are and what your goal is for the next 6 months.
If only we knew. I think that's one of the things that's most difficult about this, Jennifer, is wondering how it's going to unfold. It's hard to look too far down the road and imagine how it's going to be. So it really is a kind of it's a day-to-day thing at this point.
What is the last update on your church? Is it going to be salvageable? Are you going to be able to get back in it at some point?
We're still working on the insurance and what the scope of rebuilding are still being worked on. We're hopeful.
Gotcha.
But all those folks need to let us know their thoughts.
And the causeway is opening January 2nd, so that's going to be a big turn because then volunteers can come. Right now, you had to have a hurricane pass,
right,
to get on the island.
Yeah, that's a real
Gotcha.
miracle there. I want to, Jennifer. I'm sorry.
ahead.
I was going to just you trigger something when you asked what you asked. There's one thing I want to make sure that I said, especially to Bill, but to all of you. You're going to fail a lot. You're going to have a great idea that's not going to work. And you have to be, this was hard for me. I'm a real competitive person. I don't like to lose at anything. And, I would try a program, it wouldn't work. I'd try something else, it wouldn't work. And you just have to get used to that because normal is not normal anymore. And it's okay to try things and step back and say, well, that wasn't a good idea. Let's do something different. That's number one. Number two, then I'll let Jennifer talk, is people kind of, they want community, they want to be together, but you have to be a little careful how much activities and programming you do, because people are also exhausted and dealing with what they're dealing with in and out of every day. It takes a lot out of them. So maybe the best thing you can do for them is we got a pot of soup, come by and let's chat for a while, and not try to be every program that the church ever had back in action again. Just recognizing that that's going to be difficult for folks to do. And, but again, also offering ways for them to come together and see one another.
Thank you. Okay,
Jennifer, thank you.
And to tie into that a little bit, I would say, you're developing a new normal, and I assume, I don't know the audience. I assume most of these are parishioners that are on this call.
Yes.
Yes.
And so, helping them understand, the first thing you want is your normal back, your regular back. I want church back. I want to worship with, the people that I've been worshiping with. But, you got to grieve that first and then go back to the new normal. And the new normal might not be having, like David said, every service that you had before, every, 3 services a day or a service on Sunday, or those kind of things, because right now I assume you're still in the Lutheran church and you've got to do what's available. As far as the rebuilding of the church, I mean, we did have to do that, and David traveled the country fundraising, and I don't know, with your insurance issues and stuff like that, that's something to think about, because there are people out there that want to help. You just have to find them. And most churches, like David got a church, that Katie was at, a fellow seminarian that Bill and Sue know, and got us connected in California, and several churches over there, several churches in the Panhandle, like Jacksonville, that really kind of wanted to adopt us. And basically, along with the insurance money, we were able to comfortably rebuild and not have the church be in, massive debt doing it. Now there was some pushback because some parishioners were upset that David was out, sometimes out of town a lot, never a Sunday. We never missed a Sunday, but he was out of town a lot. And so he wasn't available to people when they might need him local, but it paid off. So, and the other thing is, as things start becoming your new normal, I found it about a year. That's when I found this happen, is it sets in. All the all the craziness of, cleaning your house out, cleaning your church out, cleaning, helping other people, the immediate need kind of levels out. And in about a year, we found a lot of depression, anxiety, things that were kind of being held in. And I know that y'all kind of had a big children's participation in your church. And I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner, so I kind of lean that way. But we also found about almost 2 years later that the children had kind of gotten forgotten. We were dealing with the parents and rebuilding and, making sure that, they had food on the table and clothes on their back. And the children were kind of pushed aside until they weren't. And then we saw the depression in them come out, the attempted suicides, the cutting, the acting out kind of stuff, wedding beds for the little ones and things like that. And so if you can be present with that sooner than later, you would be ahead of the 8 ball on that.
That's very true, Jen, because, we're going to have our first messy church this weekend, but, I have no idea how many families are going to come because they're so scattered. And I'm talking to them, and one's on the East Coast, and they're 5th graders in the hospital with seizures because they have so much anxiety.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
so, I've been actually like sending little packages, and I got a cute little video from, some of you will know Little Bowen, Mari and Chaz Simcox. They were really instrumental in Messy Church. And I sent him this little light of mine, and they sent a little video of him singing This Little Light of Mine. And she said that meant so much that we remembered him.
Yeah.
But, who knows if Messy Church is going to work or not.
Where are my friends? Where can I, even with our own children, mostly Joseph because he was little, but where are my friends? Are they okay? Did they, and then they're so separated because some of them went off to live somewhere else and attended the rest of school somewhere else and there. And so doing what you did is perfect because it helps them remain a part of that community and their friends and not just their immediate school friends and stuff. But taking care of the kids as well as the parents is a huge, like I said, you'll be ahead of things if you can do that. And it sounds like you are.
That brings up another thing to keep in mind also is that we're talking about ambiguous loss. The loss is not just of your way of life or your buildings or things like that. It's also the loss of people who aren't coming back. People that you care a lot about, members of the church, neighbors, etc. And I'm sure it's going to be a high percentage of people who just have decided we can't do this again or we can't start over. And we lost so many. And what we found is people who didn't have roots in our community are the ones who just wouldn't, they had to leave because their houses were damaged and they started life somewhere else, and that was it. And we didn't see them again. And we didn't really have a good way of processing that. So you might want it's a little soon for it, but be thinking about, are there some liturgical ways we can, a blue Christmas kind of thing for people who've just, moved away due to the storm and are started life somewhere else, but it's still kind of part of your hearts and your church. And just to recognize that and allow people to talk about that loss because it's something to grieve.
Does anybody have any questions for us that maybe we're not hitting on? It's been a long time for us, but it's still pretty fresh.
Questions from the group here? You can raise your hand. Susie Post has her hand up.
I have a question. A lot of the free services that have been in the area, free meals, FEMA, free insurance advice, free clothing even, they're all moving out now. What did you guys do when all those free sort of government, federal and state services moved out of the area? Anything?
David, you want to?
Yeah, if you remember 2005, it was a very active hurricane season.
Oh, yes.
So Rita and Wilma and all those storms were that year. So a lot of those folks did have to move on to other things. So the local folks got more involved at that point. So the state emergency management people and the local counties and stuff kind of took on some of that burden. But again, it was really the faith communities who were continuing to get help from others. We kept supplying our relief center. We had a little tent people who could shop and find, groceries and water and diapers and baby food and stuff like that. That stuff kept rolling in for a good while. We had a trucker from Canada who showed up one day unannounced with an 18-wheeler full of stuff. But the difference, there's a little difference in that Katrina really caught the heart of the nation. Everybody knows where they were when Katrina hit, and watching those folks in New Orleans standing on top of roofs and the Superdome and all that kind of stuff. So there's been so many storms since then. There is a phenomenon called disaster fatigue that sets in. So there might not be the army of folks, waiting to come and help that we had. But at the same time, you've also had the advantage of having some of your stuff back online pretty quickly, grocery stores and some of that kind of stuff. Jennifer can speak to this, but she did her free medical clinic. Jennifer, I described that clinic to him already, but she recognized that there was a time when that needed to stop because there were practitioners who had lost everything, trying to get their practice back going again, that she was taking patients away from. Right, Jennifer, you want to talk about that a little bit? And so the idea is that we want to be a help, but not a hindrance to somebody who's also trying to get back on their feet.
My answer to that question would be more of, there is some fear to me when those people start moving out. Wait a minute, we still need your help. Wait a minute, I'm not ready for you to leave yet. So there is a fear there. But like David said, the faith community tends to pull together, even if it's in Fort Myers and maybe not on the island. One thing that I would suggest y'all do from the church, even though you don't have a building, is sometimes, it's hard to be the receiver if you're not giving as well. For most church people, we're givers. We want to help. We want to do for other people. And so, you could have a committee or a group of people that would instigate, getting volunteers to lined up to come in, or gathering volunteered supplies and stuff, or the coming in for a week and cooking, or coming in for a weekend and cooking, or because people don't know what you need, and now you're so far out because y'all didn't have access to the island, and you still kind of don't. Nobody could really come in and help. So keep it fresh out there. Get you 4 or 5 people that can sit down and problem solve and say, okay, what is our immediate need? Do we need food while we work on the island until we go off for the day? Or, what's your immediate need? And that makes you feel like you're helping, but you're also allowing people to help. We're really hard at letting people help us. I know David and I that was a big step for us. So that's kind of, they're going to move out. They've got to move on to other disasters, and they're going to move out. And probably about the time that the causeway's open, that's when I would think that all the volunteers or the state and federal people are going to move out. That was a long answer. Sorry.
Well, there was a question in the chat about the Episcopal Church helping with some funds. And you just responded to that, David. Maybe it's for the whole group if you want to.
Yeah, so Episcopal Relief and Development had never helped a domestic disaster in their history until Katrina. And that's when they realized that, we got to be able to help people here as well as abroad. So they were just kind of getting all that going. Bill, you might have met with Katie Mears. She was a disaster person in Louisiana. That's how she got her start. And then ERD hired her away from there. So I've known Katie ever since Katrina. So they were helpful in helping fund some of the relief center activities, the housing and the food for the volunteers and that kind of stuff. And they helped us get some grants through Habitat and some other places for building materials. But I don't believe in their charter they're allowed to help the churches themselves directly. So we didn't get any operating funds or building funds from them for our church, but we did get a lot of help with the relief center stuff, which is important.
Katie had some great ideas about helping the church to partner with the community. it seems like that is their focus is church and community, and how can we as a faith community help with the relief of the community around us.
Yeah.
And she had some really great ideas right off the top of her head.
Mhm. Yep. United Thank Offering also can get involved in those things. Now, they don't do any brick and mortar projects, but they could help fund a vacation Bible school for kids on the island, that kind of stuff. They like doing those things and helping make those things happen.
David, on the phone, you and I talked about some of the bad theology that rears its head during a time like this. Do you want to say a little bit about that, about what you bumped into in that regard? And then I'll go to John Mason. I just saw you put your hand up, John. We'll come to you next.
Yeah. So I'm a recovering Baptist. So I can hang out with those people and speak their language a little bit. But I was kind of surprised to find I was in a meeting with a bunch of pastors that I think the Methodist Church had put together. I can't remember. And it was mostly New Orleans pastors. And as we go around the room kind of telling our story, now I'll tell you, it's never a good idea to be in a meeting with a bunch of pastors that are handed microphones. It's awful. But what many of those pastors said was, what we tell our people is that Katrina was sent by God because Mississippi has all these casinos on their Gulf Coast, and New Orleans has got Bourbon Street and Mardi Gras and all this other terrible things that New Orleans does, and this was a warning sign from God. And I just couldn't keep my mouth shut when they said that. So the first thing I did was ask them how deep were the floodwaters in the French Quarter, and he said, well, they wasn't flooded. French Quarter is the highest point of ground in New Orleans. I said, oh, so all this decadence happens, it didn't get flooded. I said, tell me about your Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, which is in New Orleans. How much water did it get? Well, it was under about 20 feet of floodwaters. I said, so who do you think God was targeting? All this stuff. So I wasn't popular. But it did make me realize there may be people within my own congregation who, again, when we're talking about, what do you do with this ambiguous loss, who believed in the theology that God was a God who punished you with natural disasters, and that this was because of our sinful nature, et cetera, et cetera. And so that opened my eyes. I need to talk about that. And so in sermons and other venues, I was able to help them see that that's really not how God operates, that God is with us in these things. God didn't send Ian because he didn't like the buildings on Sanibel or Fort Myers Beach or whatever the reason may be, or casinos or anything else. Natural disasters happen because they're natural, right? I mean, we've contributed to that. I won't go into all the global warming stuff, but they've been going on forever and will forever. And I point them to the scripture. I mean, when God calls a natural disaster, Noah's time, after it was over with, he said, I'm never doing that again. I'm not going to punish people with that, with floods or anything else. So I think you can take that to cover earthquakes and hurricanes and all, that they're not something God's doing to you. And so it might be good if people have some of those theological underpinnings. Depends on how you're raised, because I knew where they were coming from, like I said. And it's easier and simpler to just say, well, this is why. And but it's not good theology, and it's not sustaining.
Nice. Thank you. John Mason.
Yeah.
I have a question about resentment. You had a wide area that was destroyed. We have a very narrow area that was destroyed. And so 10 miles down the road, there are people that are relatively doing just fine. And obviously those are the people who can pitch in and help. But, it seems to me that there's a lot of why me.
Yeah.
When 10 miles down the road, Joe Blow didn't have anything happen to him.
Mm-hmm.
And what I worry about is we all come together in church, and there are the haves and there are the have-nots. And seems to me that's an issue that you got to think about.
Oh, absolutely, John. That's a really great comment. It's also the flip side of that is survivor guilt.
Mm-hmm.
So those haves that are coming to church, whose homes may be fine, and et cetera, feel guilty that the people they know and love across the pew weren't so fortunate. And what I like to tell people, it's hard to avoid those kinds of thoughts and feelings. Hurricane Michael, which was a Cat 5 storm down here, devastated Panama City. It didn't even rain here, and we're 30 miles away. So it's like there, but for the grace of God, right? So those are common questions. Why us, and why not us? And I just try and encourage people that why is the wrong question, because you're not going to get an answer. And the better question is, what now? What do we do now? And if I'm a survivor, how do I help? And if I'm a victim, how do I allow people to help? And how do I see God in both of those circumstances? In ways can open up your mind to that. But it's a real thing, John, and it's going to happen. And I think it's good to address it and have it out there and talk about it. But it's hard to avoid those feelings.
Thank you for that. Other thoughts or questions?
John has
You got another one, John?
Well, since nobody else wants to talk, I'll keep talking. You talked about, being afraid when you looked at the next storm coming. And I don't know when it happened or how long after it happened, but in 1954, when I was 9 years old, we lost our house, not our big house, but our summer house. And when we walked back down into the area, in our house, for example, you walked into the second floor because the first floor was underneath it, but smashed with the second floor coming down on top of it. And you tend to feel the little things that remind you that God is there. Like you talked about finding your mug. And we found money that had been under a container on a bureau in the second floor, was still there. So you gotta appreciate the gifts that God gives to you to help you through the process. And as a 9-year-old, I remember, being fearful. Where we went up the road and stayed, the water came an inch from coming in the house. And that was 1.5 miles up the road going up, uphill from the beach. And there was another set of circumstances where there were people up on a big hill looking down over the place where our house used to be. And there was an old couple that was that people worried about. And my brother left the place where we were and just had it in his mind that he had to go down and help them. And everybody said, are you sure you really want to do this? And he said, yeah, he was. And he made it to their house. And the thing that impacted him was he watched our house get picked up and slammed up against that hill and, disintegrate. And I know that has really been an impact on him, whereas I felt reasonably secure. And so when I walked into the house, yes, it was a really terrible situation. And it took me a long time to get over it, but maybe because I was so young, I was able to get over it because your parents were, really encouraging and saying things like you said, God doesn't get resentful to some of the people or other. Everybody is a child of God. And so his promise, and I guess that's why my favorite symbol of reminding me of the wonder of God is when a huge rainbow comes across, and he says, God says, I'm not going to do this again, and here's what I'm going to do to remind you that I'm never going to do this again. Right. So whenever we see the rainbow, I mean, I just get connected back to God instantly.
Yeah,
that's really good.
We have to look at the.
Yep. Doreen has a thought. You can just take yourself off mute.
Okay, sorry.
You're on.
I'll see if I can articulate this question that I want to ask. I have said to many people, the scriptures are so rich, and I've studied them for all of my adult life. And so now I am learning to apply the word and my faith in ways that I haven't had to necessarily before, because the situation is so changed and so different. Our whole life is upended. And so, but all of what I know and what God has taught me, now that I'm mature in my faith, I'm so grateful for that. And I've shared a lot of that with family and with friends, because living our faith in adversity, we're modeling that. I'm a lot older than my children and grandchildren. And so every generation has their turn in adversity, whatever that is. And no one escapes it on this earth, because we're broken people and we live in a broken world. So, that's what I've been saying, is that, my parents modeled how to face adversity. They went through World War II, and my dad fought and was a hero there. And it's our turn, and it will be our kids' turn and our grandkids' turn someday. But so I said that as a background, but the question is this, in your mature faith and going through this, what are some of the ways that you applied your faith, or what God taught you in this, because you were facing a brand new situation that you hadn't faced before? What were the ways that you applied your faith, or the revelations maybe that you had in it that matured your faith even deeper?
Boy, that's a great question. I can remember in the very early days, every morning when the sun came up, we got up and went to work, and I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know how to pray I didn't know what to do, and I said, God, I'm just going to start driving to the relief center, and whatever people I'm supposed to interact with this day, you help me through this stuff. And that happened day after day after day. But I think the thing that, and Jennifer might have a better answer than I do, the thing for me that kept my faith strong was the people. Not just my people from my parish, who were amazing, but all these folks who came. And I would spend time at the relief center talking to the volunteers, and I would always ask them, why are you here? And every one of them always answered, well, Jesus would have wanted me to come. And so I was a little cynical about American Christianity before Katrina. We kind of got it soft. It's kind of easy to be a Christian in America, et cetera, et cetera. We don't really have to do a lot. We can just write checks. And then after our experience at Camp Coast Care, with these tens of thousands of volunteers who came through that place, my heart was changed. And again, it was their faith, and they're saying, of course, I'm going to give up 2 weeks of my life and a paycheck and whatever, come down here and do this. This is what Jesus would have me do. And I have a lot of scripture to back all that up, but this is living scripture, right in front of my eyes. And it was very transformative for me.
Thank you.
Jennifer, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm pretty much in line with David as far as on a daily basis, after we kind of got over the shock of things, on a daily basis, just the people, the massive amounts of people. I mean, I'm still friends with a lot of those people that volunteered and helped in the clinic with me. And, for them to give up a week, a month, some 3 months of their lives to come and help me. That's crazy. And so, you saw God in those people. You saw Jesus the minute they walked in the door. So it wasn't hard to find the spiritual part of things for what we were doing. It wasn't hard at all. I didn't have to search at all.
Nice.
Bill, I've got to go.
Yep. I think that's a nice way to wrap things up. David has another commitment at the top of the hour. Maybe you can join me in thanking David and Jennifer for being with us tonight. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here and for your insights, and of course for all of your care and your prayers and your support.
Well, once you're ready for people to show up, we're coming. So we'll get to
I
meet some of you
appreciate
guys
it.
in person. So.
Yeah, we have. It has been amazing, the outpouring of support. People saying that they are willing to come and help. As you were talking about those things. We're not at that point yet, but we're keeping a spreadsheet of churches and individuals and groups that have volunteered to come and to help with the rebuilding effort when that time comes. So
let me leave you with let me leave you with one thought.
Yeah.
We early on settled on Psalm 126 as being our psalm for our recovery. So the Psalms have all the emotions people of God have ever had: joy, jubilation, fear, where are you, God, kind of stuff. But Psalm 126 says, when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, then we were like those who dream. Our mouths were filled with laughter and our tongues with shouts of joy. And we said that psalm every Sunday and then sang it on the day we moved into our new building. And we held on to that promise that,
Nice.
that God, we need to be folks who dream, and that God will eventually fill our mouths with laughter. So that's my prayer for you guys. And you've got the right leadership, Bill and Sue. You're doing an amazing job. And don't forget to take care of yourselves. Y'all, other folks, make sure they're taking care of themselves, because you want them for the long haul. God bless you.
Thank you.
With you.
Thank you, David.
And David and
Thank you,
Jennifer,
Jennifer.
the day after the storm, they were, as soon as we could communicate, they were the first ones that called and have sustained us throughout all this. So our love to them. And they were the first ones to say, when you're ready, our church is coming. So you'll probably see a lot more of David and Jennifer in St. Simon's on the Sound.
There you go.
Thanks
so
having
much.
us. Anytime something comes up, y'all let us know and we'll see what we can do.
Thanks, Jen.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Good night, everybody.